On the morning of the 24th of December 2002, the city of Modesto, California, welcomed the Christmas dawn in a thin chill, light as a veil of mist. Inside the house at 523 Covina Avenue, Laci Peterson gently placed her hand on the spot where her baby was moving. She smiled at the strong kicks of little Connor, humming a Christmas tune as she prepared to tidy the house, bake, and take the family dog, Mackenzie, for a walk like every other day. The warm light in the kitchen spread across the room, making the morning look peaceful, almost unbelievably so. Laci had no idea that those seemingly ordinary moments marked the final boundary between her calm life and a darkness waiting just ahead. Around 10 a.m., the quiet of the neighborhood was suddenly broken by something strange. Mackenzie, the Petersons' golden retriever, wandering in the front yard, his leash dragging on the ground, smeared with mud. Their neighbor, Karen, shivered for a moment with an uneasy feeling and quickly brought the dog back, locking him in the backyard, thinking he had simply slipped out. But the front door was slightly ajar, revealing the sound of a Martha Stewart cooking show, still running something Laci rarely left unfinished. On the stove, baking ingredients lay half-prepared. The landline phone blinked with missed calls. The entire house felt frozen in the very moment its owner vanished without a trace. The silence inside suddenly felt eerie, as if someone had just stepped out only seconds earlier, yet there was no sign of anyone. At that very moment, a soft vibration broke the stillness. Laci's cell phone received a voicemail. "Hey, beautiful. It's 2:15. I'm leaving Berkeley." Her husband's calm voice played, completely at odds with the cold, unsettling atmosphere filling the room. A muddy dog leash, a door left ajar, a TV still on, yet its owner was nowhere to be found. It was hard to believe that in the peaceful setting of a holiday morning, an unnamed danger was lurking inside the very home Laci believed to be the safest place in the world. And even harder to accept that sometimes danger doesn't come from distant shadows, but from the things we think we know best. Who could have guessed that a lie seemingly harmless could serve as a veneer, hiding a tragedy slowly taking shape? Before continuing the story, take a moment to ask yourself, if it were you, would you notice those fragile signs that something was wrong? What would you do if a peaceful morning suddenly fell into the same chilling void as Laci's house that day? Share your thoughts, and if stories like this make you more alert, don't forget to follow so you won't miss future cases. And now, let's return to the main events of the case. Laci Denise Rocha was born on the 4th of May 1975 into a humble farming family in Escalon, California. From a young age, she grew up familiar with the smell of hay, damp soil, and the sound of cattle bellowing each morning as she helped her mother in the garden and her father around the ranch. After her parents divorced, Laci moved to Modesto to live with her mother and brother. But every weekend she returned to the ranch to visit her father, as if that place were a bond no distance or circumstance could sever. As she grew older, Laci became an energetic student, once a cheerleader in high school, always radiant and full of enthusiasm. After graduating high school, Laci studied horticulture at California Polytechnic State University, Cal Poly, nurturing her dream of a simple life close to nature, exactly the kind she had always wanted. And it was at Cal Poly that fate led her to meet Scott Peterson, a young man with a gentle smile and an effortlessly confident charm. From the very first time she met Scott at the cafe where he worked, Laci was drawn in by his calm demeanor and warm gaze. So much so that she boldly left him her phone number. From that moment on, their story began quietly, like the opening of a new chapter full of promise. The two quickly became inseparable, and Scott himself believed that Laci was the woman he wanted to spend his life with. He even gave up his dream of becoming a professional golfer to choose a steadier path with her. In 1997, after 2 years of dating, Laci and Scott held a cozy wedding at a charming resort, officially stepping into a married life filled with hope. They moved to San Luis Obispo and opened a small bar together called The Shack, a project into which both poured tremendous dedication. The business did fairly well at first, but in 2001, the young couple decided to sell the bar and return to Modesto to prepare for something bigger. starting a family. They bought a cute single-story home on Covina Avenue, in a peaceful suburban neighborhood, a place that seemed made precisely for young couples full of dreams. Laci worked part-time as a substitute teacher, while Scott worked in the fertilizer business. The two settled into a simple yet happy rhythm of life. Friends and family adored Laci for her gentle nature, attentiveness, and warm heart. Their happiness became complete in 2002, when Laci announced she was pregnant with their first child. Their joy was overwhelming. They prepared eagerly to welcome the newest member of the family. They chose the name Connor if the baby was a boy, a name that made Laci's eyes brighten every time she said it. She spent her days learning to knit baby clothes, watching cooking shows, and decorating the nursery with adorable bear-themed details, each one lovingly crafted with the heart of a devoted mother. As the due date drew nearer, Laci looked more radiant than ever, even though she sometimes grew tired because of her large belly. Friends said they had never seen her happier, counting down the days to her expected delivery on the 10th of February, 2003. In Laci's eyes, the future looked like a perfect picture, one nobody imagined would be torn apart by a horrifying tragedy just weeks later. In November 2002, through a mutual friend, Scott unexpectedly met Amber Frey, a 27-year-old massage therapist living in Fresno. At that time, Laci was about 6 months pregnant, her body growing heavier and easily fatigued, while Scott often traveled for work. Meeting Amber young, single, and longing for a serious relationship, Scott was quickly drawn into the sense of novelty and excitement that his stable marriage with Laci could no longer give him. For the next month, Scott quietly lived 2 separate lives. On one side, he was the model husband who came home on time and smiled at his pregnant wife. On the other, he acted like the charming, gallant, successful man Amber believed was her destiny. To Amber, Scott was nearly perfect, attentive, engaging, always making her feel admired and wanted. And to Laci, he remained the gentle, understanding, calm partner she trusted completely. By December 2002, the Christmas atmosphere had filled their small home on Covina Avenue. Laci and Scott prepared for the holiday as usual, planning to spend Christmas Eve with her family. On December 23, they visited the salon where Laci's sister worked, so Scott could get a haircut, a small habit, but one the couple kept every month. They laughed and talked cheerfully, appearing like the picture-perfect young married couple. No one knew that this would be the last time they were seen together in public. That evening, Laci called her mother, Sharon Rocha, chatting for half an hour about Christmas plans, the secret gift she was preparing for Scott, and the dishes she wanted to bring to the family gathering. Her voice was cheerful, relaxed, without any hint of worry. At 8:30 p.m., mother and daughter wished each other good night. Sharon had no idea that it was the last time she would ever hear her daughter's voice. The morning of December 24, Christmas Eve, the fateful day, Laci woke early and put on a white maternity blouse and comfortable black pants. She planned to do some chores and then take the family dog, Mackenzie, for a walk. The air was chilly, the sky gray but dry. Laci turned on the TV to watch Martha Stewart's cooking show, a routine she followed every morning in her late pregnancy. Meanwhile, Scott was preparing to leave the house. The day before, he had told several people he planned to play golf that morning. Yet at the last minute, he suddenly told Laci he wanted to drive to the Berkeley Marina, nearly 150 kilometers away, to go fishing alone. Laci found it a bit odd. Going fishing early on the morning of December 24, when they already had plans for Christmas Eve, sounded strange. But she didn't question him. Scott sometimes had spontaneous impulses, and Laci always chose to trust him. She simply said, "Drive safely, okay? The ocean's cold." Scott smiled, kissed her goodbye, and loaded his fishing gear into the truck around 9:30 a.m. Laci stood at the doorway, one hand supporting her belly, waving as he drove off. Returning inside, Laci continued her morning with her usual calmness. She vacuumed the living room, adjusted a few Christmas decorations, and planned to take Mackenzie for a walk around the park as always. Thoughts of the upcoming holiday filled her with a warm, indescribable joy. Family gathered around the Christmas tree, the small gifts she had carefully prepared, the laughter of loved ones, everything appeared in her mind like a glowing picture. From time to time, she placed her hand on her stomach, feeling her baby growing, and a smile would naturally appear again. At noon on December 24, Modesto grew unusually quiet, as if the entire city were holding its breath for Christmas Eve. While families gathered to prepare dinner, at 523 Covina, the silence took on a different tone, a heavy, invisible stillness that felt unmistakably wrong. By early afternoon, Sharon began to feel uneasy. She hadn't been able to reach her daughter all morning, something highly unusual. She called the landline. The phone rang endlessly, no answer. She called the cell phone, straight to voicemail. A mother's instinct suddenly tightened like a cold hand around her heart. She tried to reassure herself that Laci was simply busy, but a deeper instinct screamed the opposite. Around 5 p.m., the silence was shattered when Sharon's phone rang loudly. On the other end was Scott's slightly hurried voice. "Do you know where Laci is? I just got home and she's not here." Sharon froze. Laci visited her often whenever she had free time, but not today. A vague, sharp fear spread through her like a creeping frost. According to Scott's statement to police, he said he left the Berkeley Marina at around 2:15 p.m., then drove back to Modesto, arriving between 4:30 and 5 p.m. The first thing he noticed was the backyard gate standing wide open, something Laci almost never forgot to close. Mackenzie, the family dog, wandered around with the leash still clipped to his collar, the strap muddy as though he had been out without his owner. Laci's Land Rover was still parked in the driveway, exactly as it had been in the morning. The lights inside were on, the TV was running, yet no one was watching. Scott walked inside, calling out his wife's name, but the house remained silent. Everything appeared neat and orderly, with no signs of struggle, except for one detail that startled him. Laci's wallet, purse, car keys, and sunglasses were all still in the closet. Items she never left home without. Even if she had simply taken the dog for a walk, she would have brought her phone or keys. But everything was there, as if she had vanished in the middle of her normal morning routine. Scott began calling neighbors, then Laci's close friends, and finally, his mother-in-law. The last people to hear Laci's voice were her mother and sister the night before. Panic spread rapidly, like an icy wave crashing through the entire family. Sharon and her husband immediately jumped into their car and sped toward Laci's house, hearts clenched tight with dread. The whole drive, they kept calling Laci again and again, only to hear the same endless ringing. At 5:47 p.m., Modesto police officially received a missing person report. Laci Peterson, 27 years old, 8 months pregnant, gone without a trace. Detectives Alan Brocchini and John Bueller were dispatched to the scene at once, carrying the urgency that comes with a missing person case that could escalate dangerously with every passing minute. They met with Scott at the house, listened to him recount his day's schedule, saw his parking receipt, and were shown the small boat he had purchased recently, the boat nearly no one in Laci's family even knew he owned. The detectives listened quietly while observing every detail around the house. All of Laci's personal belongings remained inside. There were no signs of forced entry or ransacking. Everything was unnervingly tidy. Only one small thing caught their attention: the Santa Claus doormat slightly out of place, as if someone had stepped over it in a hurry. Under the dim yellow light, Scott sat slumped on the sofa, his hair still damp. When Detective Brocchini asked, "Did you just shower?" Scott replied casually that he felt cold, so he took a hot shower and washed the clothes he had been wearing. A man who just discovered his pregnant wife missing, yet calm enough to shower and do laundry? The detail tapped directly into the investigator's instincts. Detective Bueller later said that from the very first moment he saw Scott, he felt something was off. Scott was too calm, not at all like a man desperately searching for his pregnant wife. Scott cooperated and answered every question, yet he never once asked the detectives anything about the search, something almost every frantic spouse does. Even so, on the night of December 24, police still approached the case as a missing person report. They did not rush to accuse or suspect anyone. Their top priority was to find Laci alive. And within just a few hours, Modesto was swept into an unprecedented search effort. More than 900 people, family, friends, neighbors, even complete strangers, took to the streets, printing and posting flyers, searching every corner with the fragile hope that Laci had simply wandered off and would be found safe. Professional rescue teams joined in as well. Mounted officers searched empty fields, K-9 units traced scents along creeks, and helicopters swept cold beams of light across open land through the night. The reward money ballooned at a staggering rate. $25,000, then $250,000, then $500,000, reflecting the extraordinary public attention. Local and national media ran constant coverage, and TV stations devoted hours to special reports on the disappearance of the pregnant young woman. On December 27, when officers searched the storage unit Scott rented to keep his boat and gardening tools, they immediately encountered a scene that sent a chill down their spines. On the concrete floor, they saw fresh patches of powder, wide, pale smears that suggested someone had recently mixed and used a large amount of cement. More alarming still, the boat trailer showed 5 clear circular marks, round impressions, matching the exact diameter of a cement mixing bucket. Nearby, police seized a sledgehammer and a dustpan coated in cement powder, as if they had been used to smash or handle something heavy. When they inspected the boat, they found a homemade cement anchor, rough, heavy, and nothing like a commercially purchased one. When questioned, Scott calmly explained that he had cast a single anchor using a 40-kilogram bag of cement, and that he used the leftover cement to patch the driveway. But that explanation collapsed instantly under the evidence. If there was only one anchor, why were there 5 circular marks? And where were the other 4 anchors if they existed at all? A chilling theory flickered through the detectives' minds. Those missing anchors might have been used to weigh down a body in the San Francisco Bay. A terrifying thought, but one impossible to prove because Laci had still not been found. The only physical evidence recovered from the storage unit was a long hair found on a pair of pliers inside Scott's boat. DNA testing confirmed it was Laci's. Scott immediately dismissed it, saying Laci's hair often clung to his clothes and could have fallen onto the boat. And with only a single hair, police could do little more. By the end of December, everything they had was circumstantial, vague, haunting, but not definitive. However, from the moment they saw those 5 circular marks, Scott Peterson officially landed on their radar as the prime suspect. By early January 2003, the search for Laci continued in desperation. Media outlets everywhere printed her photo on front pages, describing the case as a Christmas season nightmare. Then, from a call to the tip hotline, a chilling turning point shattered Scott Peterson's carefully constructed facade. On the 30th of December 2002, a young woman phoned the police, her voice trembling but steady. "My name is Amber Frey. I think I am dating the husband of Laci Peterson, and you need to know this." Amber explained that she had met Scott over a month earlier, and throughout their entire relationship, he had insisted he was single. It wasn't until a friend showed her a newspaper article about Laci's disappearance that Amber realized the man she was falling in love with, Scott Peterson, was actually married, and his wife was missing. Amber broke down in tears, saying she felt overwhelming guilt, and that she wanted to cooperate with the police at any cost. But the biggest shock was yet to come. Amber revealed that on December 9th, just 2 weeks before Laci disappeared, Scott had told her that his wife was dead, and that this would be his first Christmas alone. Those words cut through the fog surrounding the case like a blade. No normal man would say such a thing when his wife was alive and 8 months pregnant. From that moment, the motive began to take shape. Scott wanted out of his marriage, wanted the freedom to be with Amber, and the baby Laci carried had become a burden. Modesto police decided to make a bold move. They secretly partnered with Amber Frey. They gave her a small recording device and instructed her to continue speaking to Scott as if she knew nothing, let him incriminate himself on tape. It was a stressful, dangerous task, but Amber agreed without hesitation, and for nearly a month, she called Scott regularly. Every call, every word, every breath was recorded. These tapes would later become the key to exposing the true nature of Scott Peterson. The contents of those calls were enough to chill anyone who heard them. While the entire country, the Peterson family, and all of Modesto were desperately searching for Laci, Scott calmly whispered sweet words to his mistress. He continued speaking like a carefree, single man, living a life of freedom. The climax came on New Year's Eve, 2002. While Laci's family held a candlelight vigil, their hands trembling in the cold wind, Scott stood within the crowd and secretly called Amber. He told her he was in Paris, watching the fireworks from the base of the Eiffel Tower. A brazen, cruel lie, and one he uttered at the exact moment he was attending a vigil for his missing wife. When this truth came out, America exploded with outrage. By mid-January 2003, police decided they could no longer keep the truth from Laci's family. They informed them that Scott had a mistress. Sharon Rocha was shattered. The mother, who had always defended Scott, believing her son-in-law was a good man, felt brutally betrayed. That trust collapsed in a single sentence. On the 24th of January 2003, nearly 1 month after Laci's disappearance, the family held a press conference announcing they would no longer support Scott. Laci's brother, voice trembling, said, "We feel betrayed. We can't trust Scott anymore." Just hours later, Amber Frey herself appeared before the media, publicly revealing her relationship with Scott and vowing to cooperate with the police fully. Yet even then, Scott was not arrested. He continued appearing on television with hollow eyes, repeating scripted lines about hope, while public anger surged. With no body and no clear crime scene, police still couldn't make the final move. The case was stuck frozen for more than 3 months. At this point, every remaining hope rested on one thing: finding Laci. On the 13th of April 2003, a couple walking their dog along the shoreline of San Francisco Bay near Point Isabel spotted something tangled in seaweed at the water's edge. As they approached, they froze. It was the body of an infant boy, umbilical cord still attached, in an early stage of decomposition. There were strange tears on the small body, and a nylon loop wrapped around the neck and torso details that sent a jolt of horror through investigators the moment they received the call. The area was immediately sealed off, and rescue teams began searching the shoreline, combing through every meter of land. The next morning, the 14th of April 2003, about 1 mile from where the infant's body had been found, a jogger spotted something washed up on the rocky shoreline. When the jogger realized it was the torso of a woman, they panicked and immediately called 911. The condition of the body was horrific, missing the head, both arms, and nearly the entire lower legs. The victim was still wearing the brown, short-sleeved shirt Laci was believed to have worn on the morning of December 24. Examiners noted something crucial. The uterus and cervix were intact, a finding consistent with pregnant women whose fetus has been expelled naturally during advanced decomposition. On the 18th of April 2003, DNA testing confirmed the nation's worst fear. The 2 bodies washed ashore in San Francisco Bay were Laci Peterson and her unborn son, Connor. More than 3 months of fragile hope collapsed in that moment. The autopsy revealed a harsh truth. Connor's body was relatively intact, protected inside his mother's womb, showing only minor scratches and early decomposition. He had died in utero, then been delivered, as Laci's body decayed in the water. Laci's remains, however, were in a devastating state. The head gone, limbs gone, and most internal organs missing. 2 ribs were broken, and several cervical vertebrae were cracked. But due to intense decomposition, examiners could not determine whether the injuries occurred before or after death. Rumors spread that Laci had been dismembered, but the medical examiner insisted there were no cut marks. The missing body parts were most likely lost because the body had been weighed down at the wrists and ankles and then decomposed rapidly in seawater, perfectly consistent with the theory of Scott's homemade cement anchors. Once the remains were identified, the case immediately shifted from a missing person search to a homicide investigation. All the evidence collected over the previous months took on new meaning. Prosecutors believed Scott had made 5 anchors, used 4 to weigh down Laci's body, and left 1 on the boat as a prop. On April 17, just after news broke that the remains had been found, Scott disappeared from Modesto. A covert tracker on his vehicle showed he had driven to San Diego, near the Mexican border, an unmistakable sign he was preparing to flee. On the 18th of April 2003, police quietly surrounded the parking lot at Torrey Pines Golf Course, where a man with bleached hair, patchy stubble, and a hat pulled low sat inside a Mercedes. It was Scott Peterson. When officers moved in, he offered almost no resistance. A search of the car left investigators stunned. Nearly $15,000 in cash, 4 cell phones, a full change of clothes, camping gear, a knife, rope, Viagra, and even his brother's driver's license. Everything pointed to a well-prepared escape plan. As he was handcuffed, Scott asked coldly, "What are you arresting me for?" The officers replied, "For the murders of Laci and Connor Peterson." On the 21st of April 2003, Scott Peterson appeared before the Stanislaus County Court to hear the charges. 2 counts of murder. First-degree murder of Laci, with special circumstances for killing a pregnant woman, eligible for the death penalty, and second-degree murder of baby Connor. Scott still insisted he was not guilty. Due to overwhelming media coverage, the trial had to be moved to San Mateo County to find an impartial jury. Scott's family hired renowned attorney Mark Geragos for his defense, while the prosecution, led by District Attorney Rick DeStasso, vowed to do everything necessary to deliver justice for Laci and Connor. On the 1st of June 2004, the trial of Scott Peterson officially began, becoming a nationwide live show that America watched obsessively. For nearly 5 months, the prosecution and defense battled relentlessly. Prosecutors admitted the case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. No eyewitness saw Scott commit the crime. No definitive murder weapon was recovered. But they laid out each piece of the puzzle before the jury. Scott lying about golfing when he actually went fishing, his purchase of a boat and cement shortly before the crime, the cement residue and homemade anchors in the warehouse, Laci's hair found on the boat, the bodies washing up in the exact area where Scott claimed he was fishing, and above all, the affair as motive. Then, the recordings were played, the tapes where Scott sweet-talked Amber from his imagined Paris. The courtroom fell silent as the romantic lies echoed, completely at odds with the image of a grieving husband, desperately searching for his wife. Scott's defense team clung desperately to the hole in the case, the lack of direct evidence. They floated theories that Laci might have been attacked by a stranger while walking the dog, even dragging in a burglary across the street to suggest a connection. Some witnesses testified they might have seen Laci walking Mackenzie after Scott left home, but these statements were quickly dismissed as mistaken, unreliable recollections. The tide shifted entirely toward the prosecution when Amber Frey took the stand on the 10th of August 2004. Calm and composed, she recounted how Scott lied to her, how he claimed he had lost his wife in early December while Laci was still alive and pregnant. The entire courtroom looked toward Scott, his head bowed, avoiding Amber's gaze like a man with nowhere left to hide. The trial had no shortage of drama. 2 jurors were removed mid-process for misconduct. Media coverage was relentless, and crowds gathered outside the courthouse daily. But eventually, the case reached its conclusion. On the 3rd of November 2004, the jury began deliberations. By midday on November 12, the 4 persons stood to deliver the verdict. Scott Peterson was guilty on both counts, first-degree murder of Laci and second-degree murder of baby Connor. Sharon Rocha held her daughter's photograph, tears falling but eyes firm. At last, the man who killed Laci and her unborn grandson had been named for what he was. By late November 2004, the trial moved into the penalty phase, death or life imprisonment. Laci's family took turns speaking before the court. Her brother, voice-breaking, spoke of childhood memories and how all the joy was overshadowed by the way Laci's life was stolen. Her sister cried, saying every Christmas since had been torture. When Sharon stepped up to the podium, the courtroom went silent. She said Laci needed only a divorce to escape a bad marriage. Scott was seen wiping away tears, but it was far too late. On the 13th of December 2004, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty for Scott Peterson. On the 16th of March 2005, the judge formally sentenced him to death by lethal injection, along with symbolic restitution for funeral costs. He called Scott's actions cruel, heartless, and cold-blooded. Scott said nothing, just lowered his head. He was transferred to death row at San Quentin, living among hundreds of other condemned inmates, awaiting execution. One might think the legal saga ended there, but the Peterson case dragged on for years. Scott's attorneys filed appeal after appeal, arguing that media influence tainted the jury and that the jury selection process was flawed. In 2020, the California Supreme Court upheld his murder convictions, but overturned the death sentence due to procedural errors in jury selection. Several jurors had been dismissed solely for opposing the death penalty. Scott did not escape guilt, only the penalty phase was reopened. In September 2021, he received a new sentence: life without parole for Laci's murder, plus 15 years for Connor's death, served concurrently. In 2022, another attempt to overturn the entire case was rejected. Scott was officially removed from death row and transferred to a standard state prison to serve life imprisonment with no possible release. More than 2 decades later, the Laci Peterson case still haunts America. The image of Laci in her 2002 Christmas photo, soft curls, radiant smile, her hand on her pregnant belly, became a heartbreaking symbol of a seemingly perfect family destroyed from within by the husband she trusted. Her mother, Sharon, wrote "For Laci," recounting the journey of love and the fight for justice. In it, she emphasized that Laci was not just the victim of a murder case. She was a kind woman who loved her family, enjoyed gardening and cooking, and always put others first. Baby Connor, though never born, is still remembered by his grandparents as the grandson they loved from the moment he appeared as a small dot on the ultrasound. Mother and child were buried together, never separated. From their tragedy, American law changed. In 2004, the Laci and Connor Law, the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, was passed, allowing separate charges for harm to a fetus when a pregnant woman is attacked. It became the nation's way of honoring Laci and Connor, turning their tragedy into legal protection for other expectant mothers. If you've followed the story this far, take a moment to remember Laci and baby Connor not just as victims, but as 2 human beings who were loved, who dreamed of a simple future together. And if this story makes you more cautious, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because sometimes real crime stories like this are what help us stay safer in the real world.